Joining me now is Mark Mitchell. He was just with us, part of our National Worldview Weekend, and he has a very interesting post today. Do you like the idea of your republic being rooted in Christian values? Question mark. Good luck with that. More Zoomers identify as gay than as very religious. I thought there was some great spiritual awakening with our young people, Mark Mitchell. What happened?
I think people are maybe trying to find copium, and they're trying to pat themselves on the back.
Trying to find hopium?
Yeah, basically copium.
Copium,
it's so they can cope. Hopium. I don't know.
They can cope.
Copium. Pick your poison. But basically, Trump won, and everybody's happy. Right direction polling is up. And I think people want to think that the battle is over. And as people who listen to my keynote know, that this battle is far from over. This is a battle for the soul of America and what kind of country we're going to be. And if you look at the Zoomers, you're putting my video up that really goes into it. It's an hour and a half long. It's a tough watch. It's probably going to make people want some alcohol after it. But the truth is that the Zoomers are kind of not in the right place for them to take over the reins of power in our representative democracy. They just aren't. First off, they were handed a really, really crappy situation. We basically destroyed society and then said, here you go, like, good luck. And, everybody's looking at them and saying, why are they playing so many video games? Why won't they just go out and get a job? Well, they can't buy a house. The women are messed up. They all have mental health problems. It's literally just jacked, and they don't have values. Even the people that voted for Trump overwhelmingly support socialistic things because the system has failed them. They think the economy is unfair to them. No matter how hard you tell them to just go out there and touch grass, it's not going to work for most of them, and they're probably going to raise really messed up kids. I don't understand how they're going to support our buckling social safety nets. And those holes are being filled online by things like the LGBT community, which do have a pretty appealing message to them, which is like, well, you're special, you're different, and our community will validate you. And okay, it's based on your kinks or whatever, but this has been found over and over again by multiple pollsters that 23% of Gen Z identifies as LGBTQ. And you could say, all right, well, some of them are just a whole bunch of bisexual women. Sure, okay, maybe. But you know what? They're not forming families early. They're not procreating. And Gen Z women just want something different out of life than Gen Z men. Gen Z men they want to get married. They want to have kids. They want to have careers and support their family. Gen Z women, especially the Harris voters, they just want to be seen. They want a corporate career. They aren't interested in being married, having kids. And so these kids are like drinking away their college years. They're going to like hook up on the online dating apps for most of their 30s. And, then there will be a scramble for the ones that are going to procreate in their 30s and whatever. I mean, good luck, but we're not going to be cranking out the children like we used to be. And then there's the church aspect. We really hit religion hard in that video and in our keynote address. The church is...
You're talking about the one you did at my Worldview Weekend National Conference this past weekend, that one, right?
Yeah, 100%. So that video you put up is actually kind of like an expanded version with additional polling. It's like an hour and a half. Same message, though, which is like, what is the real battle in America? And it's a battle between two competing worldviews, one that's not based on morality, that, is the online liberal monoculture that is rooted in neo-Marxism and is totally fine with ignoring objective facts in order to like make themselves feel better. It's like emotional. And then there's the objective Christian capitalist rooted in values worldview. And it looks like with Generation Z, that side is losing. And so the window is closing for people to address this. And I'll give you some examples about how religion is failing. More Gen Z identify as LGBTQ, 23%, than as identify as very religious, 18% of them. And so the good news is, okay, well, 30% identify as somewhat religious. Is that enough? I don't know. I can tell you it's down a lot in the last 15 years because the 18 to 29-year-olds were just as religious as the older people 15 years ago, and they're not anymore. So there's actually a dechurching that is hitting young people. And I can see it in the polling we did in October. We did a huge poll on religion, that people are abandoning traditional large denominations, Protestantism. And actually the 18 to 29-year-olds are the most Catholic identifying as anybody. And then evangelicals is second. And the behavior of them who do attend church is pretty interesting. If you can get them to say they're Christian, they go to church just as much as everybody else. They actually do. And then among those people, we asked, well, when did you become a Christian? And you would say, well, the ones that are Christian now are probably ones that were brought up in the church. And that's actually not the case. Only 41% of them say they've been Christian their entire lives. Actually, a lot of them, 32%, say just in the last few years or very recently. So they are coming to the church, but just not enough of them. It's not their values at all. Their values are, this system has failed us and it doesn't work and we need a solution. And if that solution isn't Donald Trump, then it's going to be AOC or Bernie Sanders.
Wow. It's going to be AOC or Bernie Sanders as the next president.
Or Mom Donnie, or, well, I don't know if there's enough of these people to sway it, but I'm just saying it's like they're not going back to the Mitt Romney Republican Party. They just aren't. That is a non-starter. It's not what people want anymore. These people can't afford houses, and so they don't want to hear trickle-down economics anymore because that hasn't worked, right? We cut all these taxes. We gave these corporations all these Bernanke bucks and told them to reinvest in our economy, and what'd they do? They offshored all of our manufacturing. They offshored all of our engineering and customer service jobs. It was like literally Republican capitalism was like global welfare. And then we tell these people, well, you're just not working hard enough. We tell them, you got to do what I did when I was coming up. You have to start in the mailroom or walk your resume up and hand it to the person that doesn't work anymore because they're hiring H-1Bs. And of course, I'm broad brush generalizing, but 52%, I have numbers to back this up, 52% of Gen Z says no. Not everybody who wants to find work can find a job in this economy. And less than 40% of them say today's children will be better off than their parents. And so these people should be the optimistic ones. They should be out there ambitiously pursuing careers and forming families.
But are they? Are they out there?
No, a lot of them have kind of tapped out. 17% of them are unemployed. Mm-hmm. And I assume that the underemployed number is even bigger. We don't have it. Mm-hmm. But it's like, the numbers of these people reproducing is down across the board. And when they tell you that the signal is that many of them don't think they'll ever be able to afford a house. And, the number we had, economic fairness, 62% say the economy is unfair to young people. And then it's like, okay, well, look at what they believe as far as capitalism. People who say they voted for Trump in 2024 in the 18 to 39-year-old bracket, almost 80% of those people say that major industries should be nationalized, like healthcare, energy, and big tech. Almost 60% of them say that, well, actually, yeah, I do support confiscation of excess wealth in order to help young people buy homes. And then only 1/3 of them say, no, we shouldn't have income caps. So it's like people are saying Gen Z is the most conservative generation in decades. It's like, no, these people are literally just raging against the machine. They want it burned down. And so obviously we're lucky now that they're as complacent as they are. But it's like what happens when unemployment ticks above that magic, like 20% number is things tend to happen. Like people sort of tend to get upset. And then the numbers like among relationship and mental health are super bad. 35% of these people have been diagnosed with a mental condition. Almost 30% of them are on therapy and medication.
And what age bracket are we talking about, Mark?
That's 18 to 39. The 18 to 29-year-old numbers are bad as well. They haven't had a chance to fully get diagnosed. The 30 to 39-year-olds are a little bit worse. The liberals are worse. 18 to 39-year-old liberals, 43% of them have a mental condition. But it's like definitely an age signal. The people under 40 are messed up in the head. And
Mark, how are we going to
Yeah.
sustain a network like this in a few years? When my older population that supports me passes away, how are we going to support a network like this if most of these kids who don't become Christians, don't become conservatives, are mentally unable to, who's going to be left to support institutions that we need to maintain the republic?
I mean, you got me. I don't have an answer for you because we're already screaming towards the fiscal cliff, and our debt to GDP ratio is getting high enough that most historians would look and say, oh, we're due for a major war. And, the economy loves a war when debt gets so high because it clears the deck and reshuffles everything. And so that's probably the most likely outcome. And if you look at the way that everybody's posturing, like NATO is still super expansionist, China is probably out there right now doing exercises for Taiwan. And I heard that reports that they're building up their blood banks and stuff like that, and then it's like all the stuff going on in the Middle East. So I'm presuming that that's probably what's going to happen next because that's what the fourth turning in history tells us. But no, this can't be sustained. And like, listen, I don't want to be too, reactionary, but it's like, okay, the sun will come up tomorrow. The world's not going to end, but it's like, how much friction are we going to experience? How much pain and suffering are we going to have to go through until society says, well, these perversions that we've dabbled in are probably not good for the health of the human race, and we need to scale this back and return to a different kind of worldview because this one has failed. It's cyclical. Apparently, this has happened a lot in the past, like after the Civil War. So hopefully we don't go through something like that. But I mean, it's like the writing's on the wall. And listen, I'm not one of these people that it's like human race needs to continuously expand. It's like, okay, well, if our population collapses a little bit, is that the end of the world? Well, no, it's just the end of the banking system, right? It's like, and that's apparently bad for a lot of people. So, if we were in an agrarian society,
I don't really care. I could care less if the bankers get screwed. I'd actually enjoy.
Well, they have
that.
a really good habit of making you care because they socialize their losses.
Exactly right. And that's why we should get outside the system as much as we can. Let me ask you about this weekend. What did you take away? We're at our National Worldview Weekend. What did you take away from that weekend? What surprised you about that weekend, if anything?
The biggest takeaway is just how committed and upset Christians are. You know what I mean? Like they have a God, they believe in him. I do too. And they're upset and they don't know how to fix it. And what I'm seeing on my side of the fence is that nobody in the system is even like concerned or working on this. Like nobody's listening to me. I have a lot of followers that listen to me, but it's like the Republican Party, people feel it. Just talking to the people, they, in my opinion, palpably feel that their leadership is completely 100% not aligned with where these people in the country are going.
How are they starting to turn on Trump, some of them? Or maybe if not turn on him, are they starting to become very concerned about his direction?
Well, Epstein was definitely a wake-up call. It caused his numbers to go down. And the people who turned on him most were the independents because 40% of Trump's support comes from non-Republicans. And I think that also part of that was the stuff he was doing in Israel. And his support's down to like -5 net approval rating, which is the worst of his term. But he's been here before around the tariffs. So I think there's a little bit of concern about the government shutdown, but not that much.
But what about the tech bros and executive order defending Qatar and calling the president of Turkey a good man, a strong man, having dinner at the White House with Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg? Yeah. I mean, at some point, isn't this all disingenuous?
I think that Trump will lose political capital on the right, but right now his approval rating is still relatively high. But I think when I hear the conversation that I hear loudest on Twitter is that it's arrest the clock and nobody has been arrested yet. Mm-hmm. And so that, in my opinion, is what most people are looking at, just because the accountability signals have been off the chart. People want arrests. They want the swamp drained. They want the government fixed. They want to be able to trust their institutions. And we're not seeing any of that. Because the highest numbers that Trump was doing was when Doge was fixing things, and Doge got shoved into, run off the road by the Republicans, basically. Mm-hmm. And, there's a super huge opportunity here. I don't want to be a doomer, but it's like the government is shut down now, and everybody was looking at Russ Vought and saying, all right, what's he going to do? Well, I don't know. Has he done anything? And it's like looking down at Mike Johnson and watching with bated breath as he negotiates with the Democrats. It's like, come on, man. Like, our republic is dying here. You know what I mean? It's like we all know the Democrats are going to use the nuclear option in the Senate if they get a majority. And we all know that the government's going to stay shut down, I think, right now, because until public opinion turns, the Democrats want this shut down. Remember, George Soros was lobbying people through Indivisible to keep the government shut down. This is what the left wants. And
What
going
does your polling show on Mike Johnson? What does the average American or Republican think of Mike Johnson? Because I personally find him to be a little feminized, wimpy, weasel, disgusting, typical politician. I watched him this morning and he made me want to vomit. You know, I'm just thinking, I mean, if there was a guy that you wanted to pick out of central casting to just be kind of feminized, wimpy, you know,
smarmy.
Yeah, just a guy you would not want as your neighbor, Mike Johnson would be it.
You know, Republicans don't hate him, but they also probably don't know. So there's a tendency to somewhat favorable these guys because it's like, what other choice do they have? You know what I mean? It's like you can feel in the conversation that people are mad and upset with the Republican Party. And I definitely have polling to support that. But these people still pull out, you know, like high 60s, low 70s favorability rating when Trump's above 80 right now. That's just kind of the way it rolls. Like when people were super mad at Pam Bondi and said, no, the Epstein case is not closed, including like almost all Republicans, she still did a pretty good favorability rating among Republicans. So there's this aspect of sort of brand loyalty. But the numbers that I picked out most, I think that mattered, is that we saw back in, I think it was May, we asked, agree or disagree, Republicans in Congress are not acting on the mandate that Trump was given. And 60% of Republicans agreed with that statement. So that's not good. And then 38% very favorable rating of Republicans in Congress by Trump 2024 voters. So it's like when you look at all of Trump voters that include 30 to 40% who are independents and Democrats, they're not happy with what they see with the Republican Party right now. And it's like, what have they done? It's like, we're here because people were upset at what the Biden administration did to the federal government. And so people want redress for their grievances. And it's like, you know, look, again, Donald Trump was raided in Mar-a-Lago with authorized use of deadly force. Americans did not approve of the FBI raiding Mar-a-Lago with the use of deadly force. And they said that the FBI was Joe Biden's personal Gestapo. And here we have James Comey probably did his weekly spa treatment today and had a light lunch with friends and spent a few hours posting on Blue Sky today. You know what I mean? It's like, what's it going to take? The window is closing for account. We have less than a year left before maybe the Republicans in Congress become a lame duck.
And based on the projection you're seeing now, what do you think will happen at the midterms?
Impossible to predict because the numbers are so close right now, and anything can happen. There's so much dry powder that Trump has, and it's like, are we going to blow that powder up or not? Like, are we going to put that in the cannon and shoot it? You know, it's like, where's the criminal indictments in?
Is he in a bubble? Is he so surrounded in a bubble that? Because I've seen him get asked questions and things he didn't even know. You know, I'm like, oh wow, I'll address that tomorrow. I didn't know. Thank you. I mean, I'm like, how does he not know that? He's the commander in chief. He's the president. Is he in a bubble? Is he aware of what the average voter and American out here is thinking as you poll them?
I know that some people in the administration follow my polling, but I don't think necessarily in the White House. And I can tell you across the board, the Republican Party doesn't follow my polling. And I don't have sources inside the White House, but what I hear from people who do is that there is very tight controls like InfoSec, and that there's a filter on what he hears and what he doesn't.
So he's in a bubble.
And I don't know how much of that is by design or just by that's just the way it is.
Yeah, and yet here you're a guy that should be being heard inside the White House. And so should Gordon Chang. And Gordon Chang was asked during the Q&A about his influence in the White House, and he said basically, I don't hear from them. This is the problem. We hear from the typical
let me tell you this,
Beltway insiders. They get into every stinking administration, and all of them end up the same way. Isn't that, that's not by coincidence.
Well, let me give you this example too. So we did that Epstein polling, and it was like nuclear. America was really mad at the handling of this because they said, no, there are wealthy and powerful people that need to go to jail. And I know for a fact that those crosstabs landed on the desk in the White House. Mm-hmm. And then what happened the very next day? Trump was attacking his supporters. So I don't know. Like, that's not good.
So basically, they don't care about the polling of what the base thinks, right?
I guess particularly on this issue for reasons that we're not privy to. And it's like, okay, is any single one of these the golden BB? No, but at some point the golden BB is going to come because you can already see the Republicans are trying to distance themselves from MAGA and move things in a different direction.
Is MAGA going to survive after Trump is gone?
MAGA needs to become something different anyways, because Donald Trump is the gatekeeper of MAGA, and he's a branding genius. He predicted what America needed before we even needed it. The exact issue set. It's like, yep, borders, screw China, America first. Let's stop the wars. Let's drain the swamp. It's like, okay, that's exactly what we needed. And no Republicans were talking about that. They were talking about like health insurance reform. They're like, let's repeal Obamacare and replace it with something that's even wonkier. It's like, that's never going to fly anymore. And so Donald Trump's not going to be there to champion MAGA, and the Republican Party is going to try to just be the Romney Republican Party again, because that's like I think mostly the people who are still there. And it's like, okay, incumbent on JD Vance to figure out, like, what are you going to run on in 2028, dude? And how are you going to align the Republicans behind you?
But does JD Vance even know what it is that the evangelical Christians in America want in a president? Has he bothered to reach out to evangelical leaders? Has he bothered to come on my 74 large Christian stations? No. Why? Oh, I don't know. Because, I don't know, Tucker Carlson's son is a gatekeeper and won't let us through?
I didn't know Tucker Carlson's son worked with JD.
That's who we've been emailing. We're told that was Tucker's son. And we're like, well, is our position and our strong stand for the Jewish people, not the Israeli government, but the Jewish people, is that blocking us? Because we have a very large Christian network. We would love to hear from the vice president, but we can't get through. And yet they're going to come wanting our help, I guess, when it's time to run for president. And my answer is going to be, I'm sorry, we tried. Now you're running for office and now you care what we think? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. I would presume that there's an aspect of we're not in campaign mode. Mm-hmm. And I don't like, that's the best I could say for. The other thing is, I know for a fact that one of his biggest issues is wealth inequality and reordering the economic structure to better serve Americans. And that's, in my opinion, the most important thing for the Republican Party to be fixated on. Now, there's a larger question about, like, what does our society look like? The famous Sam Adams quote that we're wholly unsuited for anything other than a Christian and moral society. Like, that's an important thing, because we're going to find that the Zoomers and probably the generation that they raise is going to be even worse. It's like, again, their hole is not being filled by Christianity. Some of them are, sure. Yes, there's an uptick. Yes, young people are going to church. But it's like, on the whole, these people have a very different value set. And quite frankly, whose job is that to fix? Like, a Republican politician or the church? And I can tell you that the church is not in a position to be fixing these things. Yes, evangelical churches for sure. But if you were to measure, like, let's just say how certain people are about their worldview, I could use as a proxy question something like, well, who is most like your views on abortion, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? And do you know who is most certain? It's not Christians. It's not Muslims. It's not Jews. It's atheists. They're the ones who are most certain about their worldview, and they support Kamala Harris on abortion.
So wait a minute. You're telling me the self-professing Christians are not sure about their position on abortion?
Yeah, 100%.
And you know why? You know why,
yeah,
Mark?
Go ahead.
Because it's founded Worldview Weekends in 1993 for this very reason. If Worldview Weekends, if the church in America, and the church is, of course, believers, it's not these 501c3 buildings, but if the institutions that we call churches in America were doing their job, if these what are supposed to be New Testament fellowships, where local New Testament believers gather together to practice their spiritual gifts for the edification of the saints, and the proclamation of the gospel and learning and training and then going into the world and being salt and light, if they were actually doing their job, there would be no reason for Worldview Weekends. I think I told you this weekend I told you that. I said, and there would be no reason in 1993 to form Worldview Weekends. But in 1993, we had churches, quote, churches, these buildings on the corner that call themselves that, they didn't want to have salt and light committees, many of them. That's what they called them, salt and light committees, to be, the salt and light of the earth. Because that's politics. And we're like, well, wait a minute. You're telling me we can't express a biblical worldview on abortion, borders, socialism, welfare, active euthanasia, etc. No, we can't do that. No, that's politics. That was 93. It's far worse now. And the average so-called pastor in America is a yellow-bellied, skinny jean wearing, feminized looking guy that gives you the creeps like most of our politicians give you the creeps. Most of your pastors, in my opinion, are like Mike Johnson. They're not people that you respect. They're not masculine figures. They're not leaders. They're empty suits, and most people would not want them as their neighbor. That's the average, quote, pastor in America. Trust me, I know, okay? And that's why the church is failing. Because when we would go to towns and hold worldview weekends, yes, we've had churches sponsor us, but increasingly we had to go to hotel ballrooms after 2008. The economic crisis happened in 2008. We used to have churches begging us to come to town, and we would, and they would even, some of them, sponsor tickets to get us there, and then they would resell them to their congregation. But that was the minority. Many of the churches in town would never promote us, even though we're bringing in some of the great thinkers like David Limbaugh and many others that talk specifically about a Christian worldview, or someone like you, okay? Then when the financial collapse of 2008 happened, the churches completely walked away because at that point, then it became nickels and noses. It was like, whoa, we can't afford to lose any more money. We can't do anything controversial. And by then, the Rick Warren model of the seeker-sensitive church, let's take a survey of the community and ask the community what they want in a church. And guess what unsaved people want? They want a coffee shop. They want skits. They want entertainment. They want marriage counseling. They want financial counseling. And so after 2008, it was like, hey, our numbers have dropped. Our dollars have dropped. Well, we make that up by bringing more people in to offset the drop in dollars, because those who are here now can't give as much. So we replace them with new people, and then boom, our giving's back up. So we certainly can't do anything where we talk about abortion, active euthanasia from the scriptures. Not that the knuckleheads that are most of these so-called pastors could even find the Bible verses that deal with those topics. So I can tell you point blank, the churches in America, quote churches, God passed over those and said Ichabod a long time ago. Okay. And that's why I, after going to a bunch of them here in the Bible Belt, where we don't have enough Bible in our belt, finally said, I'm done with this dog and pony show. Because that's what most of them are. One of the, quote, churches up the road, when we wanted to use their auditorium for a youth conference, said, do you have to speak on creation versus evolution? That was controversial to them. All right. And they got evangelical in their name. Right. And I could go on and on about the clown shows in my community in the Bible Belt. Right. And that's when I said, I'm done, I'm out. And I started my own online church service. And now I do that online. And our numbers are huge because they're not getting in these so-called churches what they should be getting, which we give them, which is why so many people watch our Sunday night church service. So I can tell you point blank, what we're left with are a bunch of politicians posing as pastors who, when they went to seminary, didn't learn much about the Bible. But I can promise you, from friends of mine who went through these seminaries, they learned a lot about administration and fundraising. So they don't know squat about the Bible. And when I challenge them to call into my show live to take me on, none of them will call me and take me on live. You know why? Because they know I would eat them alive. I had a guy come up to me this weekend at the Worldview Weekend and tell me...
They know they're wrong.
Oh, well, I think they do. I don't know. I'm not sure some of them are smart enough.
I'll prove it right now. Not the pastors, but the people at church.
Okay.
And, I saw this with the Methodist Schism. In the Greater Conference, they actually said when we debate LGBTQ clergy, you're not allowed to refer to the Bible, which is a pretty strange thing for a religious denomination to do.
You're not allowed to refer to the Bible.
Yeah, in the arguments for the Greater Conference about their positions on homosexuality in the clergy, apparently in the Greater Conference video, this is somebody who watches this and was following it very closely. They said, no, you're not. We don't want biblical arguments here. But so we have, first off, there's a huge overlap with the abortion stuff and the LGBT stuff. And so I think LGBT was this Trojan horse of tolerance that allowed these denominations to get hijacked by Marxists. But In my opinion, there are two types of Christians. There was a lot of way to slice this data, a lot of data. It's free on our website. It was an October 24th poll funded by the Institute for Faith and Culture on rasmussenreports.com. People could just go click on the download. You got to use the search function, type in Christianity, and then download the crosstabs. But Christians who want the church to stay out of politics are pro-choice by 38 points. Christians who want the church to get involved in politics are pro-life by 28 points.
Oh, wow.
And so the people who support abortion, who support candidates that want unfettered abortion and late-term abortion and baby parts and all this other stuff, the Kamala Harris Christians, they are not crossing the streams mentally. They've created a situation where they go to church, and because of that church or because of their mental gymnastics or because the way that they've formed their worldview, they're pretty fine with baby killing and being a Christian. And I guess a lot of Christian churches are too.
Yep. And that's why when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, people went flooding back into the churches. I was like, uh-oh, because they're not going to find answers in the vast majority of them.
Yeah.
I had a guy that came up to me this weekend. He was at our banquet on Thursday night, the conference the whole weekend. He's a senior citizen. Okay, he's a senior man. He's been a Christian a long time. He's a senior, gray hair, a wise guy, smart guy, discerning guy. He was there to learn. And he walked up to me and he said, "Can I talk to you at some point this weekend?" I said, "Yes, sir, you can." So he saw me I was on Thursday night. He saw me on Saturday and he said during the break, "Is now a good time?" I said, "Yes, sir." And I sat down on the edge of the platform during the break. He said, "I went to lunch, or maybe breakfast. I went to a meal with my pastor. And I mentioned your name and that I was coming down here to Memphis for your conference. He got red in the face and exploded when I mentioned your name." I said, "Really? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He became irrationally angry. I said, "Did he say why he doesn't like me?" He said, "Nope, but he doesn't like you at all." And the more he talked, I finally figured out who this guy is. I said, "Wait a minute." And I gave some details about the guy. I've never met him in person that I know of, but I know him, and I won't say how, but I know who he is. I said, "Oh, he doesn't like my book, Marxianity, that came out in 2018, explaining how Marxism and Christianity have merged, and that the Gospel Coalition and John Piper and a bunch of these other guys, David Platt, Matt Chandler, the rest of the guys are pushing nothing but socialism wrapped in Christianity for what I call Marxianity." Okay? He's a Gospel Coalition guy. And he's angry because he doesn't like the fact I've been calling these people out. And I know this factually 100%. And I said, but the guy never seems to have the courage to call into my show live and challenge me on the air because he can't.
Yeah.
And he doesn't apparently have the ability to articulate to you why he goes angry when you, that's his words, not mine, why he got angry when my name came up. I said, why doesn't he have the courage to say, I don't like him because ... He doesn't want to tell you that, I don't think, because I think he would reveal his hand. And he said to me, this is really shocking. You know for a fact he likes some of those reformed, hyper-reformed Calvinist of the gospel. I said, yes, I do. So I'm telling you now, when these young people go rushing back to these churches, most of them are going to be running right into the arms of the Gospel Coalition characters who have penetrated all of the denominations, Calvinist, Reformed, non-Calvinist. And if you go to their website, and I have all the screenshots for years, they are for redistribution of wealth. They said, tell your congregation, pastor, tell your congregation to vote for Hillary when she ran against Trump. They trashed Trump when he was running the first time. They are for reparations. They are for basic income. You know, this idea. I mean, it's
the one
pure
that gets me
socialism.
that's even more, the one that gets me that is even more evil. And I've heard this so many times going to like these large denomination churches and hearing the prayers Remember back when Russia invaded Ukraine?
Yep.
And the prayer was always framed as pray for Ukraine, that it holds out, that it fights back, that it's, it was always pray for Ukraine. First off, let's acknowledge that although the leadership of Russia is suboptimal, that it's like, 60, 70% Orthodox Christian as well. So Christians are dying on both sides.
True.
And then let's also acknowledge that since this war has happened, the chaplain of the Senate was talking about how he set up a prayer event for the senators, and it's so stunning and brave because they prayed every day that Ukraine could hold out. Well, they're losing like 5,000 people a week. And so what they should have been praying for is a swift end to the conflict through a successful peace resolution, but they weren't doing that. They wanted the war to continue, and that's what was in the prayers. That seems to me to be almost like evil, and it never really squared. And it's ubiquitously the same thing I heard every time I heard it brought up. And so it's like, I guess these people, like you said, when they rush to the church, they're probably going to hear the salvation message. And then they're just going to keep hearing that over and over and over, because when you strip everything out of the Bible, that's pretty much what they're going to, that's like what's left. I have people, because of this stuff I'm tweeting, Christians, telling me that abortion's not in the Bible, dude. Like, you know what I mean? It's like,
so they don't know. They don't know one of the 10 Commandments is "Thou shalt not murder." They don't know that one.
I know, right?
They don't know that the word for the baby inside the womb or outside the womb is used in the Bible. It's the same Greek word, whether in the womb or out of the womb, which shows you God sees it as a baby, whether in the womb or out of the womb. They don't know that, do they?
No, it's just a house plant. It's just a soulless clump of cells, according to Christians. And I'm telling you, it's like Christianity just doesn't, there's good news. Like, people still say they believe in Jesus. They still think Christmas is a religious holiday. They think it's important. They think Easter is important by a majority still. But the problem is that if your religion doesn't really stand for anything, like what's the point?
Well, do they know
and
what the point of the Christmas is about, the birth of the sinless Savior? Do they know that Resurrection Sunday is about him dying for our sins? I mean, how many of them actually believe in sin? How many of them believe in universalism? How many believe there's only one way? John 14:6. How many believe that? Here's the problem. When you go to a lot of these churches, a lot of these churches today, they're not even teaching a biblical gospel. Some of these gospel coalition guys, they're preaching a hyper Calvinism that merges justification, salvation by faith alone, they're merging justification with sanctification. Those are two. You get saved, that's justification. And then sanctification begins, ongoing faithfulness and obedience as you study the Bible, indwelt by the Holy Spirit, and conform your life more and more to the teachings of Christ as revealed through his word, through the character and nature of God. That's justification, then sanctification. These Reformed churches merge many of them together and make it a works-based, and then they add in social justice to it. So now if you want real salvation, you better be involved in good social justice works. And that's not the gospel.
Yeah. Well, as measured by abortion, Christians in America are plus 2% pro-life. And I just don't think that's good. Now, the last time we measured all of America, it was plus 16 pro-choice. So the Christianity signal, like blended, all the Catholics, all the Protestants, all the evangelicals, the Christianity signal is 18 points for abortion. And I think it should probably be higher. But when you look around, the evangelicals are plus 30 pro-life. So they're doing something right. Maybe not, they could do better. But maybe some of these evangelicals are like big denomination people that go to a contemporary service. I don't know. But the Protestants, the Catholics, you would hope were a little bit more than plus 5 pro-life. You would just hope the Catholics. But the Protestants were plus 1 pro-choice. And so it's like, what are they doing? Now, I can also tell you that Protestantism is dying in America. Now, this is self-ID. I asked, are you evangelical, or are you Protestant or a Catholic? And so obviously some people might not know what the word Protestant means, right? But if you look at the percent by age bracket of Protestants, it's 59% of people over 65. It's only 24% of the 18 to 29s. So these large denominations, and I have the numbers by denomination too. It's pretty wild. If your church is part of a large denomination, then you're pro-choice by 4 points. But if your church is not part of a denomination, you're pro-life by 17 points. So they're 21 points apart. But when only 18 to 29 is only 24% Protestant and they overwhelmingly identify as Catholic, most, then how many more generations is it until basically, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, Unitarian, whatever, they're all going to be gone. So maybe that's good news. I don't know. But it's like, it's writing on the wall. Like, what is anybody going to do about this? And like you say, they're just hiding.
Well, someone asked me this weekend, how does he differentiate Protestants from evangelicals? And I said, I think when he says Protestants, he's talking about people that would be your mainline Protestant churches. Evangelicals is a specific subset. And they asked me, well, what does that mean? What's evangelical? This was someone who'd never been to a Worldview Weekend before. And I said, evangelicalism was largely birthed as a reaction to the postmodern, modernist movement of the mainline churches that began to deny the inerrancy of Scripture, the death and burial, resurrection of Christ, the salvation gospel, biblical message. And that was more of your modernist. And that gave birth and rise to what we now refer to as evangelicals, right, who are following the fundamentals of the Christian faith. And they were into obviously evangelism as well, the Great Commission, and preaching the gospel. And it was a specific subset. So a Protestant from an evangelical is to distinguish, I think he's trying to distinguish between your mainline churches and your really conservative evangelical churches.
I think there's an overlap there, but we can't have overlaps in polling, so I have to force them to pick one. And so it's all just down to what they hear those words, which one do they pick?
Well, they wouldn't know if they don't choose evangelical. I mean, if they don't know what evangelical means, they're not going to choose that. So the ones that hear it, they know right away. That's me. But your ones that don't choose it, they don't choose it because they don't know what it is because they're not part of it.
Yep, and there'll be the Protestants, and they are a declining share massively by age group, down more than half. So again, the writing's on the wall, but they would rather be a progressive political action committee for the few decades they have left until maybe there's a major, how do these denominations have a revival? Everybody's like, oh, Charlie Kirk got shot, we're going to have a revival in America. It's okay, but why? Why? Why would we have a revival? You know what I mean? It's like, what people have a revival because they need something. Well, what does America need?
Let me just say, to have a revival, you have to first be revived. There's revival, and there's a lot of churches today that have never been revived. So how can they have a revival?
Yeah. When people are surrounded by things that cause them cognitive dissonance and fear of violence, fear of fascism, fear of threats to democracy, fear of rising prices, fear of political violence, fear of violent crimes, fear of government overreach. There's a lot of fear out there. And when I look and I say atheists have a stronger worldview than Christians. Now, the evangelicals are the second best. They know what they believe, as measured by whose values reflect yours on something that's biblical, right? Protestants are completely split. It's like they anything goes, and they're gonna probably die because of that. And it's clear in the polling, and I guess we'll see where it goes. But the church needs to offer something, and it needs to get involved because overall, it just looks like things are going in the wrong direction.
Can I just tell you if it is up to the quote church in America to save America, America's doomed. Okay. And I want to make very clear what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your typical 501c3 on the street corner. This is a guy that's been in the trenches doing this for now going on 36 years. If it requires the so-called churches of America to save the country, we're done. And that's why you are seeing, I believe, that God is now using others. He's using real Christians, real believers who are speaking truth without fear. And when you start seeing Christians being murdered as we are around the world, and the height, the absolute drastic increase of real Christians being murdered.
Yeah.
That's because those people are real Christians, right? All who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will what? Face persecution. Why is the church in America, by and large, not persecuted? Because they're not practicing biblical Christianity. This is a social club, new type of spirituality. That's a spiritual salve for the soul. It's not biblical
It's an
Christianity.
enemy.
It is
It's
absolutely, which is why I wrote Religious Trojan Horse in 2011. They're becoming Religious Right in 2016. What we are seeing is the building of a false dominant global church as predicted in Revelation chapter 17, verse 1. Now, is there a real church? Are there real Christians? Yes, ecclesia, called out ones. Believers, you, me, those in this audience who have placed their faith and trust in Christ alone, his death, burial, resurrection. This is the church. This is the bride. But these institutions that we have on these street corners, most of them are not, there is no blessing on that by God himself. Okay. And this is why you're seeing, I believe, thankful to the rise of what's left of Christian radio, and now, of course, the internet and social media, why you're seeing groups like ours and others having all-time record high traffic. We spiked after the murder of Charlie Kirk, and our numbers are holding. Why? Because we will do programs like this, okay? And these young people are scared, they're afraid, and they're looking for answers. And I think most of them are tuning in, realize that the guy sitting here, he doesn't really care about whether he hurts someone's feelings. He's committed to truth. He's not entertaining us, and he's not trying to spin something that tickles our ears so he can attract the biggest crowd. In fact, to the contrary, he deliberately seems to say stuff to make people think, even offend them, so he can weed out the wheat from the chaff. And that's exactly what we do. People email me and say this and say that, and I don't answer a lot of emails. I don't even do my own social media. The guys in the control room do it. But I will say, email them back and say, then guess what? This program is not for you. Because we're not here to entertain people. We're not here to make them feel good. We're here to give them truth and to arm them with the facts and to prepare, I think, the church, the real church, from persecution that, as I predicted in my book since at least 2011, the real persecution of the real Christians is going to come from a false, dominant church. That's what I'm preparing my viewers for the pastor at your local church who will be the one turning you into the police. And trust you me, this has history behind the Iron Curtain. The ones turning you in will be your own stinking so-called pastor and church members, many of them who, by the way, we were warned about by Richard Wurmbrand, who did 14 years in a Romanian communist prison because he refused to comply, who said most of those so-called pastors have been caught up and entrapped with sex or finances, and they were doing the bidding of the government. And so when this continues, it'll be your so-called Christian friends and family who turn on you and turn you in. You better get ready for persecution, and it's going to come from the so-called, quote, church. That's the false church. But Jesus said that, Mark. A man's enemies will be of his own household. But that's why we're growing, because we will speak the truth, and I'm not here to entertain people. If that's what it's come to, I will retire, okay? I've been doing this 36 years. I don't have to keep doing this. You came to my house. I'm more than happy to retire and sit in my brick room and build fires and watch John Wayne movies.
We need you in the trenches. You got to get on Twitter.
I am on Twitter.
You're deliciously pugilistic enough.
Wait a minute. What's that word? What does that mean? Wow, like that word. Write that down. What does that mean? Is that a compliment?
It's like sportingly combative, I guess.
Okay,
like,
good. I am combative. That's right.
Yeah, you would be amazing rubbing people's failures in their noses about this kind of stuff. You know, the one that, and this isn't a real political poll. It was just a Twitter poll, but I was kind of mad after listening to the sermon at my former Methodist church after the Charlie Kirk assassination. And I put a Twitter poll up that said, okay, well, like, if you're in a mainline denomination, did your pastor mention Charlie Kirk or not? And, I got like over 30% who said no. And it was all the usual players, your Presbyterians, your Methodists. So this is like basically a guy that's as close as you can get to a modern day disciple, right? Doing more evangelism than pretty much most Methodist pastors, probably certainly reaching people like out in the world,
Yep.
not in the pews, right? And if you can't figure out a message, oh, well, we're a Bible preaching church. And it's like, okay, well, like Jesus used parables. You know what I mean? Like Jesus made the message relatable to people. Jesus helped them cope with the things that they were dealing with in their daily lives. It makes no sense. This guy got shot, and people are processing the reality that their very neighbors are cheering for that. Mm-hmm. You can't find a message to relate to that situation that people are going through, that people fear their neighbor, that people don't understand the wantonness of this political violence, that people, how can you not do that? It seems almost like dereliction of duty to me. And I'm not trying to make this political. He was a very prominent Christian figure.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I am so turned off by modern day Christianity, so-called. I've ordered my family that when I croak, do not hold my service in a, quote, church.
Yeah, I'm with you. We found a good evangelical church.
And I bet that shocks people. Shocks people. But these aren't churches. And I'm not going to, I don't want a service in one of these, quote, churches. I told them, you know what? Go up to Wisconsin and hold a memorial service in the Waukesha Expo Center. But don't bring it into one of these, quote, churches.
Yeah. It's bleak. And people need to definitely up there. It's all hands on deck. You know what I mean? Like that's, I guess, where we're at.
And I guess the reason I'm saying all this, Mark, is to say if we are going to see a change or revival in the church, it has to come from you, from me, from the viewers. Because if you wait on your pastor to lead, you'll always be waiting, because most of these guys are not pastors. They're what is called in John 10, hirelings. They're hirelings, okay? They are political and religious whores. And this is who Jesus warned about himself with the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the scribes, dead men's bones. They're like whitewashed tombs full of dead men's bones. If you're waiting on these people to bring revival, it is never going to happen. It's going to have to come from real Christians. Oh, imagine that. Revival has to come from real Christians. No, that's right. Not your professional hucksters posing as pastors.
There's historical precedent. No, I'm not a student of history, but isn't this essentially Weimar, like all over again with Bonhoeffer, right?
Yes.
And it's like dereliction of duty.
They dissolved their denominations. They dissolved their denominations in Germany and united under the Reich bishop, handpicked by Adolf Hitler. There were more than enough so-called Protestant churches, what we would say is supposed to be the people holding the line. There was more than enough if they had mobilized their congregation to resist. And there was only about 800 of these guys that stood up from the studies I've looked at and read and done. And Bonhoeffer, Martin Niemöller confronted Hitler to his face. He ended up getting sent off to a concentration camp. He survived. I think he finally moved to Canada and died in Canada, if I remember my history correctly. But he survived the concentration camp. Niemöller, they hung him. But the confessing church, that's what they started. And it was the denominations that dissolved, and it was the Reformed Calvinist denominations, many of them who had bought into replacement theology, that were already stewing and marinating in anti-Semitism with replacement theology, that were more than happy to hold their conferences with the swastika and the cross on the same flag.
Yep. Pretty gross. I think there will be a revival. People will come flocking back to the church, and they'll probably select in aggregate the one that has the message that's most relevant to where the national psyche is. But the question is always like, after what?
Mm-hmm. I think they'll find it online. I don't think they're going to go to these buildings. I think they're done with buildings. I think they're going to find it increasingly online, and they already are. Our largest numbers on YouTube, Mark, is when I interview Pastor Andy Woods, and we talk about the Bible. and Revelation and Daniel and biblical issues. Those get our highest numbers on YouTube. Our biggest numbers right now on any social media is on Islam, because we're addressing what is a huge problem from a Christian worldview perspective. I think the future is online ministries, and that is not anything but the failure of modern day evangelicalism. They're getting what they deserve, and I hope the bad ones absolutely collapse financially. But the sad thing is, their buildings will be turned into mosques, and that's happened in Europe. What were the largest churches in Europe that sent out missionaries all around the world? Today, their doors are closed, they're done, they're gone, and many of those churches have been turned into mosques. That will happen in America. That will happen in America. Yeah. But I'm telling you now, if there's a revival, it will come from online organizations and ministries, and this is where the bulk of them are now collecting to get their Bible teaching from online. The few shepherds, the real New Testament fellowships are so few and far between. God bless them, and God bless those real shepherds out there, but they are far, far few in between. And I think America is in for something that is really cyclical. And you've already mentioned it. You just mentioned it. That's why I wrote the book, The Coming Religious Reich. I think we're headed for a repeat of that, and you will see these churches uniting just as they did under the Reich bishop. And you already see it in the MAGA America First crowd with the anti-Semitism that is overflowing from the right. Mark?
Here's a headline. World's first lesbian bishop asked the church to remove crosses to install a Muslim prayer space. So there you have it. Reporting from Breitbart London.
And remember,
it's like you see the Anglican churches here. They're like, oh, we're diverse faith. Like, what is it? Why? Why have a building? Bishop of Stockholm has proposed a church in her diocese remove all signs of the cross and put down markings showing the direction to Mecca for the benefit of Muslim worshipers.
That's the interfaith dialogue that we're going toward. That's the Revelation 17, verse 1, false global dominant church, which is represented in the United Arab Emirates with the synagogue, the church, and the mosque. And President Trump just went to it. That's that interfaith dialogue that we're headed toward. And what's interesting is that those Muslims, the Muslim Brotherhood, is who Hitler worked with. He worked with the Grand Mufti of Palestine, gave him an apartment in Berlin, and they republished Mein Kampf From My Struggle to My Jihad. And he was on the radio preaching and teaching and proclaiming for all the Muslims to come join him and Hitler to cleanse Europe of the Jews. And then when he was done there, Hitler was supposed to join the Grand Mufti in doing it in Palestine. They didn't get that far, thankfully. But he was recruiting, the Grand Mufti recruited over 10,000 Muslims to wear the Nazi uniform. So are we shocked that these false churches now are recruiting Muslims into their interfaith? And who is it that they're going to be going after? And the Bible tells you in Revelation, they're killing believers. They're killing Jews who come to Christ. Some of those Jews are being killed by Jews that Jesus refers to twice as synagogue of Satan, which should not be used to categorize every Jew, any more than calling a pastor, a false pastor, a hireling should be used to categorize every pastor. It's a specific description. But the book of Revelation describes the number of Jews and Gentiles that are coming to Christ being murdered so quickly. But yet the Bible says they're coming to Christ so fast one can hardly number them. So is the revival coming? There is. But guess what it comes under, Mark? It seems from the scripture, it comes under massive persecution. Because persecution has always seemed to do the opposite of what the tyrants and dictators thought. Destroys the church. It revives the church because it reveals the pretenders and the fakes. And the real Christians are willing to die for their faith, where the fakes, they disappear. You don't hear from them. In fact, the fake, false religious system is what's offering them up as a sacrifice, as part of their pagan occultic, ritualistic sacrament. And that's what's coming. And the Bible describes it.
Yeah.
And to give people hope at the end of all of it, the Lord himself comes back wearing a white robe splattered with blood and a sword, and he destroys every one of them. Destroys every one of them himself. The book of Revelation describes it in incredible detail.
Yeah. I'm a recovering Methodist, so I haven't heard too many sermons about Revelations, to be honest with you.
You've been watching some of my series on Sunday night that I sent you, right?
Oh, not yet. Not yet.
I sent it to you there at Last Days Deception.
Well,
Last
I know
Days
I have
Study.
to now that you have Peter Thiel talking about the
Antichrist. LastDaysStudy.com. You can watch all what are now 48 programs, 48 hours, more to come. I'm through just a few verses in to Revelation 21. There's only 22 chapters. But the bottom line is what you're describing with your poll and your survey that you presented at our conference this last weekend is this false dominant church, this false dominant global false church. And you're seeing it rise in your polling. Closing comment?
Yeah, I mean, it's an unfortunate miasma of everything failing at once. And I'm trying to make a message that politically, everybody needs to wake the heck up and come up with some solution that's different than what I see playing out in front of us, which is the usual suspects rearing their ugly head anytime that there's a battle for leadership on the right. The right needs to be organizing against something that's very different, organizing into something that's very different than the current Republican Party. The Republican Party does not have the right value set in order to maintain its relevance in the direction that the value system in this country is going. These people are malleable. They will flock to something, I think, that has the right answers. But the right answers are not trickle-down economics. The right answers are not Christian conservatism that we had 20 years ago, right? Cultural Christianity is dying, and these people are lacking a value system, and the left has filled that void. And so the right has to figure out what to, I'm not, like, people aren't even committed to capitalism anymore, because how many generations has it been since we've had fake capitalism? I mean, it's horrible. We have basically corporate welfare kleptocracy, and it's got to be fixed. And unfortunately, there's trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of inertia to keep everything going the way it is. But we are running off a cliff. Morally, culturally, economically, we're running off a cliff. And there aren't that many people out there screaming about it. They want to pat themselves on the back and say that Gen Z is the most conservative generation in decades. It's not.
Wow. There's your headline. Look at this. Follow him, Mark Mitchell at Rasmussen, at Honest Pollster, at Honest Pollster. And before I conclude, I have to ask you, did you enjoy, we call it the Melissa treatment here. Did you enjoy the Melissa treatment this weekend? 2 meals at her house, at our house?
Oh, 100%.
Isn't she great at
gracious
that?
Hosts,
Isn't she good at that?
Yeah. Excellent. It was awesome. Great barbecue. Really appreciated it. Thanks.
Was that your first time to have Memphis barbecue?
Yeah. Yes, it was.
Was it good?
I haven't even been to Memphis.
Yeah,
went to the airport.
You were in Memphis. You went through Memphis, and you survived. Oh my! We should print T-shirts. I visited Memphis and lived because they act like it's a war zone.
I didn't even have to duck under any Glock fire.
Exactly right. I know it's so over exaggerated. All right, Mark Mitchell, as always, Mark. Thank you for being with us.
Great to be here.
Follow him, folks, at honestpollster.com, at honestpollster, I should say. That's the handle, at honestpollster. Sound good? All right, we'll be right back after this break. We live in uncertain times. In fact, we live at a time when our own governments all over the world are warning us that there could be big problems with our power grid. World War III seems to be right on the horizon. Let me ask you this. Do you have a satellite phone? Should communications go down with cell towers? Do you have a satellite phone to get a hold of that college student or your spouse who travels, whatever it might be, to get a hold of your senior adult parents? We have satellite phones at worldviewtalk.com, and you get the satellite phone for free when you sign up for their very reasonable payment programs for the service. Sign up for the service with a reasonable contract, get the satellite phone for free. Worldviewtalk.com. You'll also find they have, well, what I now have, which is a solar generator. Yeah, I have a gas generator, an LP
propane generator, but what if that goes down? I want to back up to my backup. So I now have a solar generator as well. You'll find them at worldviewtalk.com. Check it out today, worldviewtalk.com.